Mario has had a lot of beloved spin-off series over the years where he's tackled a lot of different genres. Whether it's RPGs, racing, adventure, or the dozens of sports games, there's always a certain spin-off series from Mario that you would always cherish. But among all the series he has had over the years, there is just one series that was probably the most niche at the time, which is Mario vs. Donkey Kong. Now this game was essentially a spiritual successor to Donkey Kong, which was a game that released years ago. And I'm not talking about the one that released in the arcade days, I'm more talking about the one that released on the Game Boy, which fans labeled as Donkey Kong 94. On the surface level, it seems like just a watered-down version of the original game on the arcade, just on a portable device. But after doing the 4 traditional Donkey Kong levels, the game then suddenly turns into a whole different beast. As what was a game that only had 4 levels in the arcade, the Game Boy version has 101 levels, which is definitely a boost of content if you ask me. Not only that, but also instead of being just a traditional platformer, it leans a lot more towards puzzle base. Not only that, but also Mario's a lot more acrobatic in this game than he was in the original arcade, which honestly gives up good potential of new levels in this game. This game was pretty much a big success when it released, and not only that, but also helped Donkey Kong become a big Nintendo series once more, because not only they released this game, but in the same year they also started the first ever entry in the Donkey Kong Country series, and the rest is history. But during the early 2000s with the brand new GBA, Nintendo decided to try to remaster this game for the console with a brand new Link paint, which was originally going to be called Donkey Kong Plus, but eventually the game slowly became its own thing to the point where it became a spiritual successor rather than just an enhanced port. But this time, the main focus of this game will be on the mini Marios, these little toy things that eventually took over the series during the DS days, where instead of being like Donkey Kong 94, it ended up becoming a Lemon-style series, ended things off with Mario vs. Donkey Kong Tipping Stars on Wii U, where Nintendo did the impossible and somehow abridged a Mario vs. Donkey Kong story. How the hell do you abridge a Mario vs. Donkey Kong story like that? But yeah, but after that game, there was one other entry, which was a spin-off and a spin-off of a spin-off, where it's mostly focused on amiibos. But besides that, the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series was mostly dead since 2015, so it was honestly a big shocker for everyone that Nintendo decided to revive this small spin-off series. And not only that, but also go back to its roots with a full-on remake. So similar to Mario RPG, I'm going to be focusing on the Switch version for this video, mostly because this is the version that's still fresh in people's minds. But I'm still going to be talking about the GBA version, just to show the difference between this version and the original. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. So the game starts with Donkey Kong lounging in his couch watching TV like the Banana Channel. Suddenly, as the channel starts, Donkey Kong then stumbles upon a commercial of an all-new Mini Mario toy, leaving the giant monkey in trance as the commercial keeps saying, "Buy them all! Buy them all! Buy them all!" And so, Donkey Kong then rushes out to the nearest toy store, where they immediately sold out of the toys. Oof. And so, the giant monkey then decides to go for plan B, which is to go to the factory and just straight up steals the toys. And while the Kong is committing robbery, Mario's just strolling outside when he hears the chaos going on in his factory. This is when Donkey Kong comes out of the place with a giant bag of the toys, and then he runs off with Mario going after him. Man, the intro for the remake is honestly very fascinating in contrast to the original game. Like, in the original version, it was pretty much just a slideshow, and it's honestly amazing how faithful they were able to recreate it. Even down to the simplest of sound effects throughout. Hey Toad, how much are the pricing for the toys? That line delivery right there is honestly impressive they were able to keep. The only true difference between the original and this game are the voice acting specifically for Mario and Donkey Kong, since the latter has his current voice actor instead of using Grant Kirkhope, and Mario, while still playing as Charles, has different voice lines throughout. Mario's attitude has to be the biggest difference between the two because the GBA version, Mario seems a lot more aggressive towards Donkey Kong.
Hey, come back here! No you don't! No you don't! What are you doing? What's going on here? Oh, mamma mia!
And when you head to the Nintendo Switch version, Mario seems a lot more chill in comparison. And lastly, I've gotta say is that even though Nintendo always reused his voice line for Mario games over the years, it's honestly kinda weird still hearing Charles' voice after the announcement of his retirement last year. And I think Kevin's voice of Mario is great, although I guess with Nintendo they will still use Charles' voice via archives, while Afghani does much more bigger projects. Specifically stuff like mainline titles and Mario Kart. But anyway, so for the gameplay. Mario vs. Donkey Kong, by all means, is a puzzle-based platformer. Instead of the regular 2D platforming you expect from Mario, where you jump around through courses and get tons of power-ups, instead Mario has different moveset under his disposal, where the main focus is on how to get through the platforming based on knowledge instead of just skill. Of course, you can still use skill to make things a lot easier for you through the level design, but a lot of times you need to go through it slowly. Mario can still run and jump, of course, but this time you can also do a special side jump, which allows him to get a bit higher. Mario can also do a triple jump in this game, but it's not exactly like the ones you would see from Mario 64, for example. Instead, Mario's triple jump is completely different, where he does a handstand first before doing a really high jump. And speaking of which, you can also use the handstand to block certain attacks, like this guy who likes to rain bricks around the place. And that's all I can think of. And there's different varieties of elements in the game you can use, like certain colored switches, or grabbing onto these various wires to fling around the areas to get some vertical heights. All this while trying to figure out how to get the key and getting to the goal. And so here's how everything works. For every level, there's two small sections you need to go through. The first one being where you need to find a key to unlock a door to progress, and the other half is just to find the mini Mario toys, which is in this cool little crystal ball. Which honestly, when I was little, it was probably the most tantalizing looking thing I've ever seen. And while this gameplay loop could sound a bit too repetitive a lot of times, for every world, they always try to add one brand new big element to keep things fresh, like in World 2, where everything is focused on climbing these various ropes, where if you hold 1, it makes you climb slowly, but if you hold 2, it makes you climb faster. In the Ghost world, you need to be careful to make sure to avoid these various lights, but you also need some to get through various small areas. And with the Nintendo Switch remake, they also added 2 brand new worlds to the game, with the first one being called Merry Miniland, which is not only a cool nod to the later games where they all had an amusement park theme setting. The main puzzle theme from this game also has various elements of the modern Mario games, which so happens to be the Warp Box, which did exist when Mario vs. Donkey Kong first released. And the second one being an ice world, which the main puzzle gimmick of this area being ice physics. And honestly, these two worlds are pretty good, honestly a real natural fit to the various puzzle elements in this game, and it adds a lot more content in this remake. Although I wonder how long it'll take for people to make ROM hacks of the original GBA game, where they put the levels for the remake in this version. Now, the difficulty in these levels can be a bit on the easy side, but if you want to challenge yourself even further, I recommend going through the collectibles in the game, which so happens to be the presents, because some of these can be well tricky to get, and your reward of getting them is unlocking more levels, which so happens to be the hardest levels in the entire game. Now, in the original game, when you get all the presents, you'll play this little minigame where 3 presents have something in each of them, with the best one being 5 1-ups. Now in the remake, these have been completely replaced with brand new microgames, where you need to chase a key that's flying around and grabbing 1-ups along the way, which could get you about 9 1-ups. Or is it 9-ups? I don't know, it doesn't really have a good ring to it. Luckily, it's very easy to get 9 lives in this game. The minigames in this one are less frequent than in the original one, where it's only 1 per world. And speaking of which, at the end of each world in the game, as you collect all the mini Marios, you'll have this unique second-to-last level where you need to guide all 6 mini Marios around the level, while having them collect the various toy letters, which I'm convinced is a cool reference to the Kong letters from the Donkey Kong Country games. Now, these get a bit trickier in the later parts, especially with the brand new ones, but it's best to get all 6 of the mini Marios into the chest safely, because these are not only used for completion, but also they're your health meter. Because directly after you do these levels, you get to the boss fight in the game. And Donkey Kong really wants to keep those toys because he has various tools up his sleeve, like various bombs, he messes around with the various switches, and he of course has his trademark barrels. And these bosses are honestly really good, especially if you're trying to get through 100%, where you need to go the entirety with no damage, which I honestly say is the best way to go through because it gives you a lot more challenge. Especially with the new ice wall in the game, because ice physics plus dodging barrels leads to a lot of trial and error. Although I do find it funny is that the easiest boss in the game so happens to be from Twilight Town, which is the final world in the game. which pretty much boils down to pushing buttons so the bomb can get to Donkey Kong. Although if somehow this is still giving you a hard time, you can also try the new casual mode of the game, where it basically gives you infinite lives and an infinite time limit, along with putting you in a bumble if you take damage. They even added 2-player to this game, where you play as a Toad so you can help Mario along the way, and even adds an additional key for Toad specifically to make things a bit more balanced. Now, graphically, this game is surprisingly amazing. Now, with the original GBA version, since it was going for a pre-rendered 3D sprites, it looked alright for the time, especially since it was around the time when Mario games had pretty much their refined character designs. Although despite that, I feel like this one in particular didn't really age well that much, especially compared to Donkey Kong Country, which pioneered the style and still looks better than this one. But going from this to the Nintendo Switch version, it is honestly an insane glow up, especially with the later parts of the game where it's honestly breathtaking. Mystic Forest in particular is honestly really beautiful looking. And the character models and animations of the game is also very stellar, especially with Donkey Kong, which honestly has the best looking fur since Tropical Freeze. Which is honestly a really good compliment if you're having good comparison with Tropical Freeze. I also like how a lot of the enemies in this game were also overhauled, because with the original game they were pretty much just the generic Mario enemies as you think of, but with the remake they have a lot more of a toyetic facelift. Where the trademark Mario enemies this time look a lot more like toys similar to the later games of the series, which is honestly a really good fit for this game in particular since it has a main focus on the toys. I guess my only gripe with the presentation in particular is that some of the cartoon animations from the old games is kind of lost in transition here, especially with the various death animations where they were replaced with a lot more of the modernized Mario death animations. And lastly, the soundtrack of this game is also very stellar. I have a lot of nostalgia for the original Mario vs. Donkey Kong soundtrack, so hearing them in full HD with all the remixes honestly feels very heartwarming for me. I also love the lot more calm atmosphere for the soundtrack as well. Unlike the other ones where it's a lot more bombastic, this one has a very chill vibe to it, which is honestly very fitting for a puzzle-based platformer like this.
Hey, come back!
Alright, time to talk about the final parts of the game. So after going through the 8 worlds, there will be a cutscene playing where Mario is still chasing down Donkey Kong until he stops to realize that his bag is completely empty. And so, Donkey Kong then suddenly decides to kidnap the 3 Toads that so happens to be nearby, probably to make him more mini Mario toys, I don't know. The remake version really wasn't as clear. In the original version, when Donkey Kong kidnaps the Toads, Mario, the mini Marios, and the Toads themselves came together just to point and laugh at DK, which enrages him. But I guess they thought that it was a bit too mean-spirited, I guess, or they just couldn't get it in the cutscene because of the game's different pacing. I don't really know. Personally, I thought the original GBA version was a lot more funny, but I'm not really too bothered by it. So for the final boss, you have to fight DK on this construction site where you need to free the various Toads. After freeing all the Toads, they will then give Mario a giant barrel so he can use to whack Donkey Kong off the construction site. After he gets whacked about 3 times, he then literally falls off the building, with Mario and the Toads being very concerned with him, with Blue Toad looking like he just saw a person's death before his eyes. And so, that was Mario vs. Donkey Kong. The credits roll by, Donkey Kong crashes in a truck, both main Marios, and then he steals it. Oh. So yeah, when you first finish the game, you're only halfway done because there are 8 more worlds to the game to go through. Which honestly, back in the day, it was such a mind-blowing twist for me because you would think when the credits rolled that was it, but no, it is honestly a lot more things to do in this game after the credits roll, which is honestly really cool for me. And as for the new worlds of the game, they pretty much combine the levels you would be playing throughout the game with the main Mario escort missions at the end of each world, where the main Mario toys have the key to progress, but you need to make sure they are safe so that you don't get killed by the enemies. Which is a really cool shake-up to the gameplay loop, and honestly the plus worlds in particular are my favorite parts of the game because of it. Not only that, but also the various boss fights in the plus worlds are also a lot harder than the regular ones, except for Twilight Town, which is still very easy, which is kind of funny. Now going through all 8 of the plus worlds leads to a new cutscene where it goes pretty much the same, where Mario chases Donkey Kong down, DK stops, and checks his bag. But instead of the bag being completely empty, there is only 5 remaining mini Marios left in the bag, which Donkey Kong grabs and heads on top of the building once more. On top of the building, Mario then finds the mini Mario toys, then suddenly Donkey Kong summons a giant robot out of nowhere and grabs the mini Mario toys for himself. And so, the true final boss commits, and honestly, this is a really good one. I really like the atmosphere and the music. And it gets very tricky, especially since Mario gets stunned every time DK slams his hands on the ground. And once Mario does the final blow, Mario retrieves all the made Mario toys from Donkey Kong. And despite everything Donkey Kong has done in the game, Mario then decides to give Donkey Kong a small toy for him, which is honestly a really nice thing for him to do. He's honestly a really good guy. And so, that was Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and overall, I honestly really love this game. And let me tell ya, I've been waiting so long for a return to form of the series. Because back in the day, I thought Mario vs. Donkey Kong GBA was the coolest thing I've seen. And to finally see this return on a brand new shiny console was honestly very surreal for me. I highly recommend trying this game out. It's honestly a really good time, although I honestly say wait for a price drop for this game because it's still a $50 game. I'd honestly say $40 is a much more better pricing for this game. Although at the same time, I do think Mario vs. Donkey Kong does a bit better when adding new content compared to other Nintendo releases over the years. And considering the fact that you get all the content from the original game plus 4 more worlds in particular, I honestly say Mario vs. Donkey Kong on Nintendo Switch is definitely the definitive version of playing the game. It's been a long time coming, but we're finally back. But in the meantime, I think it's time for us to do a little marathon again, but this time with a brand new series on this channel. Not just one, but also 2 series. But that'll do for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye bye!